I'm Hegine Hakobian. This is for our Slavic immigrant artists in the Northwest Digital Humanities Project internship. So could you please tell us about your childhood and upbringing?
Briefly, my childhood and upbringing started in Moscow, Russia, which is where my family was born. We immigrated to upstate New York through a Jewish refugee program in 1989. And I grew up mostly in New York State, sometime in the city, sometime upstate. We moved around a lot because my mom was always looking for, a better life, better job. It wound up being a lot of disruption to my childhood, but she was doing her best.
What was your immigrant experience?
I was painfully shy. Not speaking the language at first didn't help with that, but the shyness never went away, even after I did learn English. So I spent a lot of time reading, and it would take me a long time to make friends. So I think kind of books were my first friends are very, very important to me. And I lived right across the street from the school library. So the librarian knew me very well. It was a difficult childhood. I think it would always take me at least a year to settle in anywhere. And then we just move pretty much right away.
So you mentioned that you were reading a lot and library was your heaven. What were your favorite book types when you were growing up? So both in Russian and in English, yeah.
In Russia, I barely learned to read Russian. I was 5, I think. My mom read a lot of Russian fairy tales to us, so that's what I remember. Especially remember the illustrations of Ivan Bilibin. So that wound up being a really big influence on my work. When we came to America, I was a pretty good reader, so I was reading chapter books pretty quickly, and the one that really stood out to me was Matilda. That was my favorite book growing up by Roald Dahl, about a lonely little girl who spends a lot of time at the library. I really related to that. Just sort of her strength in adversity was really, really wonderful. And then another book I really loved was Catherine Called Birdie by Karen Cushman. Similar, that one was historical fiction. She did not develop telekinetic powers, but she played a lot of medieval pranks on people, which I really loved. I loved anything funny. I loved anything maybe that was like a little bit twisted or dark. And I think all that is
magical as well.
Magical, if that's available, sure. Yeah, I really wanted out of the life I was in, and books were a really good.
Yeah.
A good way to imagine.
So, but how did you come up with the idea of creating books?
I think anytime you're surrounded by something, you're consuming a lot of it, you start to think about how it's put together, and it doesn't seem so difficult. I think it's just paper. I had a lot of paper, had some ideas. And I think every elementary kid at some point has a school project to put a book together. But I remember making picture books in elementary school, and then writing my own short stories as soon as I had access to a computer. I think I was just very, very much in my head. And yeah, trying to write it down. I didn't really show anybody though at that age, which is interesting because I think that's a big part of my practice as an adult. Is everything is to show somebody else, to communicate with somebody else. But as a kid, it was just for me.
It's interesting that it's the textual combination, the text with the illustration or with the picture. Yeah, so that type of author you became.
Yeah. I loved telling stories without any words at all, if I can.
Yeah.
I did both, but that especially. Maybe because it took a while to speak English or to write. That's more visually focused.
Yeah. So, and it kind of turned into your artistic style, right?
Yeah.
And definitely it gradually was developing. But has your artistic style changed in the process of writing or over these years?
Since I was a kid, I really hope so. Yeah, definitely. I think I started out doing much more slow kind of. My mom put me, she found some art classes for me, which was really wonderful. A painter friend of hers taught me to oil paint, taught me to watercolor, just these really slow representational art styles. And as I got older, I just loved cartoons. I loved animation. So that's kind of where I went naturally,
Uh-huh.
just to more sort of funny, quick. I wanted to tell stories more quickly through my drawings, and then I wound up in animation, which is such a communication-based medium. It's not a still image; it's moving.
It's dynamic.
Yeah, everything's dynamic, and it's not for keeping. It's almost like this. When I was working in storyboards, none of my storyboards wound up in the final film. Everything's disposable, but it communicates a story to the person it needs to communicate a story to. And that's kind of where my work got simpler and clearer, hopefully, and communicated what I was feeling and thinking as clearly as I could to the reader, which I think works really well for
You're
children.
trying to make your the result or the product of your artistic process simple, but it's not a simple process at all. Not at all. So, what is the most challenging part of the artistic process?
Oh my gosh. I think it's all challenging in different ways. Graphic novels, which is something I guess I'm probably best known for, is very, very slow. The book I just finished is 350 something pages, and it took over 2 years to draw. And then how many? I don't know. I've had this idea for years and years and years. And I finally shared it with my first kid reader. My friend's daughter read it. And she texted me back immediately and said, "I'm done. I read it in an hour. It was wonderful.
Oh,
Where's the next
it's
one?"
Magic.
Yeah, so that's always like a little bit, why did I pick this? But they do come back to it over and over again. Yeah, these books, they live a really long life. So I think a lot of it's patience is really difficult for me. And then idea generation is also really difficult because it's hard to sustain excitement for just any idea. It has to be really meaningful to me. Personally, it's got to be fun to draw, fun to write, and it takes a while to have like lightning strike.
What do you hope your characters' experience can teach us, the readers and lovers of your books?
I think the main thing I'm going for is probably empathy. I think my characters are not always like me. They're not always like the reader. But hopefully some of the struggles they're going through are something that the kids can recognize, that the adults can recognize. And I think, that's a really, really important part of reading is just feeling viscerally in your body what a character is feeling. And if it's something that's been like a private secret that you've had, seeing it reflected on the page is just so validating and gives you so much. Like, that's what I got out of books as a kid, like seeing the loneliness of the main characters, because I didn't know how my classmates were feeling. No one admitted they were lonely. I'm sure they were, but that's something, that like private empathetic connection with the book character. That's what I'm trying to do, and I love hearing that I've succeeded.